Hello, and welcome to the Battleship Brawl Companion. I'm Evil for Zergan. In this episode, I'll be reviewing the BC-19 B-10 flotilla, which consists of the... Let's see, which one am I on? Um, so, to the port side, we've got the Scharnau, and my avatar is on the Gneisenhorst. These are, of course, named after the famous German World War II battle cruisers Gneisenau and Scharnhorst, just with the syllables interchanged. As for the creator NutterChap, he was one of the duo that made the second place entry in the first season of the Battleship Brawl tournament, namely the BB-15. So, looks like we're up to 19 now. While perhaps not as elaborately detailed as the Mirai Shiki, made by Light LD, who was the other half of the duo, um, these are pretty good-looking ships. NutterChap has invested some time in making this nice North Sea camo. We've got a true superstructure and some decorative chains and anchors at the front of the ship. Most of the deck is flat, but I mean, you wouldn't want anything getting in the way of the guns, would you? It's also got the raised, I don't they call this the Atlantic bow? Helps keep spray off the turrets if this were a real ship. Here it's just a nice touch, this raised forecastle, I believe. Well, let's see. Both ships are the same except for the paint, as far as I am aware of. Let's get this thing moving. So, after reaching full speed, we're just above 19 meters per second, which puts this well above average for this tournament. There's definitely faster ships, but I mean, the average is probably only a 15 or 16 meters per second, so this does have an edge in speed over most ships, as befitting its battlecruiser designation. Make a turn here. Turn rate is just under 5 degrees per second. I'd say right about average for this turn, maybe slightly greater than average. The propulsion is provided by a bunch of propellers in the back, including some small propellers. As I mentioned before, small propellers are less cost and energy efficient than full propellers, but perhaps it was necessary in order to prevent the ship from pitching up, which has been quite a problem sometimes in this tournament. See, Menti's bonus video had even the massive Amagi pitching up at a comical angle. Behind that we have the two rudders. I think there are only two. Don't see any in a quick inspection. Now, note that rudders don't block each other or propulsion, so you can put one rudder behind the other, no problem. Front is pretty streamlined. I mean, the center line won't be so streamlined. This was, again, before wedges were introduced, but the rest of it seems to be mostly long slopes, so that's not going to cause a whole lot of dragging. Let's talk about the protection next. NutterChap has made a very has invested heavily in a spaced armor scheme. Got a outer layer of metal, a few blocks of air. Beyond that, we've got another layer of metal, a few blocks of metal, and that 2 layers of metal, wood, more wood, and finally some additional metal or other armor surrounding the turret and other essential parts. The primary AI is encased in heavy armor. There's 2 AIs. Personally, I would have gone for a few more, especially as the other AI is in a vulnerable point in the bow. But this should be quite durable enough for most purposes. NutterChap didn't. NutterChap elected not to use repair bots. He didn't say why. If I had to guess, either he presumed that the battles would be too short for the repair bots to make back their materials cost, or he just didn't want the potential lag it would be causing viewers, or maybe he just didn't trust pathfinding. Who knows? But whatever the cause, the ship has none of those. Let's see. What else? The ship has 2 engines, so that'll provide at least a bit of redundancy in case one gets hit. It is air pumped. Now, I don't think this ship would sink too much, even if all of its air pumps were breached. It does have a pretty healthy amount of wood, and just a few blocks of wood can offset a surprising amount of metal. And this ship doesn't really use much in the way of heavy armor. I don't see any lead on it either, so although its freeboard is not super high, although, I mean, a few meters is a lot considering how wide this ship is, I don't think flotation will be an issue. I don't recall flotation being an issue in any of the matches I've seen, or in my testing. The ship is kind of has a fatter aspect ratio than the historical thing. A lot of this is because, well, I mean, I suppose one could have gone for the Ixo strategy. Well, I mean, it was only partially a strategy. Part of it was making it historically sized. These are much shorter than the historical size, I believe. Let's see, 112 meters long. If I look up the historical Scharnhorst, we'll see that the length is 234.9 meters, so I'd make this about half as long as the real thing. Meanwhile, the beam is 31 meters compared to just about the same for the real thing, so this is just as wide as the real thing was, but only half as long. But, I mean, there's not as much to put inside a ship and from the depths as there is in real life. Simply because, I mean, a lot of it is just because, I mean, there's no human crew to speak of, which means that you don't have to build hollow, really. You don't need like food and bunks and all the other things that are needed to sustain a human crew. Plus, a lot of the other components are just more compact too. So, and just in terms of hydrodynamics, from the depths really favors a much fatter aspect ratio than would necessarily be optimal in real life. I mean, link drag is pretty huge. I mean, if we get going again, even with a ship this fat, the link drag is only more or less comparable to the cross-sectional drag. Maybe a tad higher, but I mean, not that much difference at all. Okay, finally, let's talk about the armament. NutterChap has elected to mix all 3 of the allowed pellet types for this tournament. We see a mix of usually favoring fragments, but looks like some of the guns are a bit more on the explosive. If there's one ship that convinced me, or one entry that convinced me to take a second look at frags. This is the one. With enough fragments, you stand a pretty decent chance of cutting barrels off enemy guns, which is going to be quite an advantage in this tournament. I mean, while I suspected ahead of time that the vulnerability of guns was going to be an issue, I did not expect it to be as critical an issue as we've seen in these matches. I mean, so many matches have been decided just by which ship can keep its armament intact, or at least functional enough to land good hits on the enemy ship. And if your barrel gets cut, that means lower velocity and lower accuracy, which is going to put a dent in your efforts to successfully hit the enemy ship. Let's see. But more details about these 18-13 millimeters. If you're going for the fragments, I would recommend a slightly larger gauge, simply because fragments and EMPs sort of double dip on the gauge. Not only can you pack more in a higher gauge, you also get more fragments per effective material at a higher gauge. So, but 1813 isn't bad. I just go slightly higher. Let's see. The internals are pretty well constructed, and especially so when you consider this is a 3-gun turret. You have to be careful when constructing these multi-gun cram turrets, because some components are safe to share between the cannons, but some aren't. Let's see. So a quick rundown, if I remember correctly. Sharing 6-way connectors is bad. One cannon will just claim all of them, leaving none for the rest. Likewise, sharing gauge increasers is also bad for the same reason. And autoloaders. Now, where it gets interesting is the ammo boxes and the materials. Sharing ammo boxes is usually not good, because while I believe you'll get the autoloader reload bonus for shared ammo boxes, even if the ammo box doesn't belong to that cannon, the ammunition it stores is only available to the cannon that claimed it. So, I mean, if you've got ammo boxes to spare, then maybe that's a thing you might consider. But otherwise, you want to be keeping your ammo boxes separate. These material or pellet boxes, as I call them, are much safer to share. The claiming turret gets half an effective material box, so there is some difference to claiming, but apart from that, it's just autoloader connections, which, I mean, ultimately make up the majority of the effective materials, so sharing them is generally no problem at all. Most of these have, I think, either 3 or 4 autoloaders connected to them. While perhaps less efficient than some of the single gun designs we've seen. I mean, getting this to work on a 3-gun design is no small feat of engineering. And especially to get them all so balanced. I mean, all of them have just pretty close to the same amount of total material boxes, and they have exactly the same amount of ammunition boxes. I'd personally go with a few more ammunition boxes. They are linked up pretty well, which does help, but let's see. Reload time is 15.52. Each shell uses 193. So that's like a net, and then there's 10 boxes. So let me try to divide real quick here. Yeah, that's like a 12-ish ammo per second, I believe. Yeah, somewhere around 12, 13, probably closer to 12. I didn't use a calculator or anything, so that could be off. So, I mean, the boxes will be losing ammo slowly, but with 10 boxes, you're refilling at 10 ammo per second, and I mean, that means the net rate of consumption is only 2 or 3 ammo per second. So, 2,000 ammo should be plenty for a 10-minute battle. On the other hand, maybe you could squeeze a bit more fire rate out of it if you use more ammo boxes. But, I mean, at most that's still going to be like, what, a second off the reload time, so, I mean, maybe worth it, but it's definitely not going to, uh, I mean, it's definitely within the right ballpark for optimal ammo. Let's see, firing arc, is 30 degrees, should be plenty for this tournament, especially considering how stable these ships have proven to be. Yeah. Finally, the turrets. Let's see. Forgot to mention. So, if you get a side-on hit on a barrel block, you're going to need about 250-ish effective fragments to cut through that barrel. Um, I think by the time these are reloaded, it'll be most of the way to the maximum load. It'll be somewhat less than this, since I've been letting them fill up with pellets for a long time. Um, but let's see. The ones with fewer fragment materials have 466 fragments, so on a good hit, they could probably cut through a barrel, but given that the enemy's barrels will be generally pointing to you, you're probably not going to get a favorable angle with the frags. So it is a bit borderline. If you're going for the barrel cut, you might want a few more boxes than this. But the ones on the side do have a few more boxes of those, and they've got over 1,000 fragments at full load, so they should have a pretty decent chance of cutting barrels with a single fragment. So just something to keep in mind. I mean, the bare minimum is somewhere around 250, and the higher you go, the better chance you have of cutting barrels if your frags strike at a glancing angle to the barrels. Of course, the trade-off is that the more fragments you put on, the less of the other materials you can have, or less effective materials. So, I mean, I haven't really decided for myself where exactly the trade-off happens is the best, but it is something to keep in mind. Explosive does tend to be somewhat better for raw damage than frags, but I mean, it is tricky business, and I mean, who knows what changes will be made to the game rules and stats in the future. Last note about the turrets, I mean, they look pretty huge. Although in my testing, they seem to have an uncanny ability, the ships, to get hit in everything but the turrets. I mean, we've definitely seen some devastating turret hits in the tournament all ships, really. But I mean, when I was testing, I mean, it would seem like the ships would be despawned from 2 damage and still have 2 or even all 3 of their turrets still functioning. So I don't know. Maybe they just got lucky in my testing, or maybe just the white beam throws a lot of the shots into places where they're not doing damage to any actual critical components. But overall, a solid speed, solid maneuverability, impressive spaced armor. I don't think. Is this 10 meters thick? Let's see. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10? Yeah, that's outside the turret, so, I mean, a side hit is, even with max radius, it's not going to be able to get in there. So, I mean, impressive spaced armor and most excellent armament. I mean, probably one of the strongest designs in this tournament. I'd probably put it in the top three, probably. Uh, Thanks for this awesome design, NutterChap. Best of luck in the rest of the tournament. Although I'm facing you next match, so. Um, but yeah, excellent performance. Um, Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see y'all next time.